And so fast forward to today, I've owned over 2,000 houses that I've rented long-term. I own thousands of apartment units now. In 2006, my net worth went up $17 million while I slept. And you might say, wow. And I said, wow. And I got a head so big I could barely fit it through a door. And I thought I was a real estate god. And you know when that happens, the God of the universe will give you a nice little smack. Well, that was 2008. In 2008 and 9, I lost $50 million conservatively. That is really the mindset it took to have $50 million to lose in the first place. And then maybe as important, definitely, maybe even more important, is the mindset it took to recover from that to the success I'm blessed to have today. So
I am so grateful that this podcast has allowed me to meet hundreds of people now. And one person that I always wanted to interview, and even before I started the podcast, I said, I hope I can get Rod one day in here. So today's the day. So thank you for being here, Rod.
Oh, what a kind thing to say, Ahmad. Thank you so much. Let's have some fun today, my friend. It's a pleasure to meet you, by the way, and I hope I can add some value.
Well, you already added so much value to my life. Before I started real estate investing, I looked for people who spoke in a different way about real estate investing, that brought down the hardest, most difficult vernacular and put it for people that to be able to understand, like, okay, what are we doing actually? What does a value add strategy mean? What does it mean a repositioning of an asset? And you were very instrumental there. And I want to go into that, but before, I want to know your story, because I think your story is inspiring. And let's go to your background, perhaps. I think not a lot of people understand that when they see you, they'll be like, oh, you're a real estate magnate and one of the biggest coaches of multifamily in the world, but you didn't start there.
I appreciate that. Yeah, so let's go way back, because I think it'll add some framework to the rest of my story. So I'm a Dutch immigrant, okay? I was born in the Netherlands and immigrated with my mother, Zvansha, and my brother, Albert, when I was 6 years old. It was 1966. We ended up in Denver, Colorado, and we didn't have much. I remember growing up, we actually shopped at a food that had expired, at a store that had expired food. We drank powdered milk with our cereal in the morning because it was cheaper than real milk. And trust me, it sounds better than it is. I wore clothes from the Goodwill, hand-me-down clothes from the Goodwill, literally until I was 14. I lied about my age, saying I was 15 so I could get a job at Burger King flipping burgers so I could finally buy my own clothes and have a little bit of my own money. And I'm sure you've got listeners, especially if your audience is entrepreneurs, that had it harder than I did, because that's part of it, and maybe even have it harder now with all the changes happening. But I knew I wanted more, and luckily my mom had an incredible work ethic, so she babysat kids. We always had a house full of kids, and with her babysitting money, she was an entrepreneur. She invested in IPOs in the stock market successfully with no formal education, but also invested in real estate. And her first real estate acquisition was a house right across the street from us. When I was 14, she paid about $30,000 for it. And then when I was 17, she told me she'd made $20,000 in her sleep. And this is when $20,000 was a lot of money, mind you. Okay, this is 1977. And I said, $20,000, you didn't do anything? Forget college, I'm getting into real estate. So I got my real estate broker's license right when I turned 18, which you could do back then with education. They got smart now. To be a broker, you have to have some experience to have your own office. And I was smart enough to go work for a broker, but I was a broker and I was still living at home. And my first year in real estate, I made about $8,000. My second year, maybe $10,000. But my third year, I made over $100,000, which back in 1980 was some pretty decent money. So what happened between year 2 and year 3 that caused me to 10x my income? Well, what happened was the broker I was working for, actually, I was dating his daughter, and he taught me about the importance of mindset and psychology, how really 80 to 90% of your success in anything is just that, the mindset and psychology. Only 10 to 20% is the mechanical stuff we talk about on our podcasts. It's to do and it's to keep doing. And so fast forward to today, I've owned over 2,000 houses that I've rented long-term. I own thousands of apartment units now. In 2006, my net worth went up $17 million while I slept. And you might say, wow. And I said, wow. And I got a head so big I could barely fit it through a door. And I thought I was a real estate god. And when that happens, the God of the universe will give you a nice little smack. Well, that was 2008. In 2008 and 9, I lost $50 million conservatively. And So what I'm known for talking about on my podcast, and at my events and things like that, is really the mindset it took to have 50 million to lose in the first place, and then maybe as important, definitely, maybe even more important, is the mindset it took to recover from that to the success I'm blessed to have today. So happy to drill down on some of that with you if you like, Ahmed.
It's incredible because I'm sure there's people listening that said, hey, I'm in a similar situation, and if Rod did it, I can do it too. And you said that the biggest change was your mentality, your framework. This podcast is called Return on Identity. It's a play on return on investment, because I think when people say I put $100,000 in, I got $200,000, it might sound very good, but 10xing your productivity based on your mentality, to me, is 100 times more interesting. So what was those lessons that you think made that 10x jump when you were a broker?
Well, let me say this. It's less about lessons and more about strategy, because it's the same strategy that I utilized to have 50 million to lose in the first place. Okay. And it's the same strategy, if you're listening, that you would utilize to, maybe you've got a W-2 job or you're not happy with what you're doing. It's the same strategies you would utilize to take life to the next level. And so the first thing I did was I reassociated with my goals. And that's the first thing. If you come to one of my boot camps, I do virtual boot camps every couple of months. If you come to one of those, the first thing we do is goal setting on steroids. Because how do you get anything if you don't know what it is? You need to know what it is you want. And more importantly, you need to know why you want it. And so, you've got to create that hunger. You've got to create that burning desire. And so that's the first thing I did, was reassociate with my goals. After I crawled out from under the rock I was hiding under for losing everything after a couple of months. But, so I reassociated to start creating that hunger again. And that's what you need to do to get started, candidly. You've got to want it. And that's how you push through fear and, limiting beliefs and things like that. When you've got that burning desire, you'll get back up when you get knocked down, right? And, you've got to want it. And I would tell you to do it by finding what you love as well, and finding your mission and purpose in life. Because when you want it and you want success as bad as you want to breathe, success is inevitable. But it starts with goal setting and getting pictures of your goals, putting them around you. So that's the first thing I did, was reassociate with those. And then I made a decision, and that's the next piece. If you're getting started, is you've got to make a decision. And I don't mean a decision to dip your toe in the water, or a decision, 1 foot in, 1 foot out kind of a decision. I mean, it's done. The Latin root for the word decision means to cut off. So if you're going to attack the island in battle, you burn your ships because you're taking their ships home. That's a decision. You're committed. And when you're committed, you're like a train on a track. And if you're not committed, you're going to get knocked off track. So, the decision is the first piece. Motivation will get you started, but that commitment via decision is what'll bring you home. And, and then, I suppose the next piece, Ahmed, would be, you've got to take that first step. And I see it with my students. In fact, when I 10x'd my income back in, when I was young, what I did was I started knocking on doors of people that were in foreclosure, and I ended up buying a lot of those houses. I bought 500 houses, and I listed a bunch of houses for sale and helped people out of foreclosure. But those first few doors to knock on, I'm going to tell you, were pretty challenging and stressful. But you've got to take that first step. And, Dr. Martin Luther King said, you take that first step in faith, the next step will be revealed. Lao Tzu said the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, but you've got to take that step. And sometimes the most important decision of your life is to take that first step. And, a lot of analytical people, and I'm sure, if you're listening and you're analytical, you know who you are, and I love you, and you're very successful in my business. However, you also know how you have to check off every box before you make a move. You can't do that, okay? You've got to just trust and have faith and move forward. And don't fear failure. I call my failures seminars. That was a $50 million seminar. That was a big freaking seminar, but that's what it is. If you don't it's a seminar if you get back up and you get back on the horse. It's only a failure if you give up. I will tell you, there are people that killed themselves for losing less than I lost in 2008 and 9, and of course in the Great Depression as well. And so don't fear failure. What I'll tell you to fear actually is fear regret. This life isn't a dress rehearsal. And as it relates to regret, there's this nurse in Australia, a hospice nurse, and she took care of patients when they were about to die. Her name was Bronnie Ware. And she asked him a question, Ahmed. The question was, do you have any regrets? At the end of their life, do you have any regrets? And she wrote a book about it. It's a bestseller, something like The 5 Regrets of Dying. You know what the number one regret was? Not living the life I could have lived, living someone else's life, not doing what I know I'm capable of. My friends, fear that. Don't fear failure. Fear that. I've built 29 businesses so far in my career. I was shocked to see how many they were. Several worth tens of millions of dollars. I have 2 right now that are. But most were spectacular, flaming seminars, okay? Because we fail our way to success. So don't fear failure, fear regret. And I see this first step thing with my students, and I'll brag for a minute. I have a coaching program. They're called my Warriors, and they now own upwards of 300,000 units, I believe. We're counting them. We're well over 275,000. We know it's a lot more than that, but all under my tutelage. Again, something I'm very proud of. But I see it with them very often. That first deal, it takes 4 months, it takes 6 months, it takes 8 months, and I'm kicking them in the butt. You got this, go do it. You're going to make it happen. And then they get one. Next thing you know, they have 3. What just happened? Well, they recognize that it's all between their ears. It's that first deal stress and all that. So again, no regrets, my friends. And fear is typically what holds people back. And please interrupt me here at any time, Ahmed, because I can blabber on for hours. Okay.
I don't want to interrupt you because it feels like a download of so much information, of so much inspiration and wisdom.
Oh.
I think when
thank
people, I agree with you. The first step is the hardest. The journey of 1,000 steps, like 10,000 steps, like you said, takes one first step. And when you have your students, what is the most common perception of fear that they have? Is it failure?
Oh, good question.
Is it perfectionism? They want to buy the perfect deal, or what's stopping them the most?
Great question. Well, it's certainly both of those two things. Okay, but see, mostly what it is it's the story they tell themselves as to why they can or can't do it. Okay, and the students that I have that succeed rewrite the story and they just go do it. It doesn't matter if they're already have some money. It doesn't matter if they're living on ramen noodles. It doesn't matter if they live in a big city versus a small town. I've had NFL, NBA players. I've had famous actors. None of it matters except the ones that succeed are the ones that change their story and push through that fear, push through the limiting beliefs. In fact, let's talk about fear and limiting beliefs for a second. So, when I immigrated this country, I got thrown into school, and I've got a prop behind me I want to show you just because it's funny. So when I immigrated, I got thrown into school, and I found out what bullies were for the first time. So I got my butt kicked occasionally, okay? And then my mom sent me to school in these wooden shoes, and these are the actual freaking shoes. We found them when she went into assisted living, and these shorts the Germans wear for Oktoberfest. So, of course, that was crack cocaine for the bullies, so I got my ass kicked again. And then, the bullies would chase me home from school, and she'd chase them off with a fly swatter, so the next day, ass beaten. And so I came up with this limiting belief that I wasn't good enough. I used to ask myself, how can I show them I'm good enough? Which, of course, presupposed that I wasn't. And a lot of people have these limiting beliefs that hold them back. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not courageous enough. Another one of mine was I'm not analytical enough. I don't have enough time, money, whatever. I mean, here's the thing to remember is there's a reason that the acronym for belief systems is BS, because they are BS. I'm like 99.9% of the time, but they have no basis in fact, but we believe they're real. And I will tell you, I used to be afraid to raise my hand in front of 10 kids in a classroom, and now I speak in front of literally thousands and thousands of people a year in flip-flops typically. So if you have one of these limiting beliefs that you're consciously aware of, I would encourage you to drag it out into the daylight. Look at it with your adult rational mind. And if you do that consciously, it will dissipate. Now, sometimes you're not consciously aware of it, but if you've got one of these, drag it out, look at it, and it will dissipate, I promise you. So, that's a big one. And then, fear. Of course, we all have fear. We achievers, we call it stress. But, the most successful people on the planet push through in spite of the fear. And of course, action mitigates fear. Anytime I've got stress, quote, or fear, even if it's 3:00 in the morning, I'll get up and I'll do something. I'll write something down. I'll do something because it mitigates it. And so, don't fear fear. Typically, we fear the emotion of fear rather than what we're actually fearful of. But another piece I'll mention to you, I host the largest real estate podcast really in the world now for commercial real estate. I'm very proud of it. I think we're well over 30 million downloads. And the reason I bring that up is I listen to two podcasts for the most part, because I just don't have that much time. So I listen to Joe Rogan and I also listen to Tim Ferriss. I try to get both sides of the aisle. I'm definitely on one side of the aisle. In fact, the Joe Rogan side, I just listened to his interview with Elon Musk. Let me just suggest that it was extraordinary, the one he just did. So I highly recommend that, by the way. But I also listen to Tim Ferriss because I want to stay balanced. And Tim Ferriss has an incredibly interesting show in that he interviews the best of the best in the world. Best athletes like the swimmer Michael Phelps, NFL, NBA players, actors like Hugh Jackman, Ed Norton, Arnold, Jamie Foxx, billionaires like Ray Dalio, heads of the biggest companies in the world like Zuckerberg. And what he does is a very intellectual conversation, a very stimulating conversation. But what he does is he deconstructs their success. It's fascinating conversation, like I said. But I started to hear a pattern. And this conversation, by the way, I'm talking about focus right now, because where focus goes, energy flows. And I think the most successful people on the planet have the highest degree of focus. Look at people like Elon Musk, for example. But here's the thing. What you focus on gets larger, both positive or negative as well. But back to my story about the podcast. On Tim Ferriss's show, all these best in the world people, they all meditate. Like literally 80% of them meditate. What does meditation enhance? Focus, right? And so I thought that was fascinating. But, and I don't know about you, Ahmad, but I'll be sitting watching Netflix and I'll be scrolling through social media, which just kills your focus. So, pay attention to that, my friends. Pay attention to your focus and try to manage it. Consider meditation, because you want to minimize distractions as much as you can. But back to, what you focus on gets larger. I get asked all the time, how do I get out of student loan debt, which is horrible debt here in this country? And I say, wrong question. How do you make so much money that debt's irrelevant is the question you should be asking me. They asked Mother Teresa when she was alive if she was anti-war. She said, no, I'm pro-peace. I mean, kind of the same thing, but you get it here, right? And so, pay attention to what you're focused on. It would have been very easy for me to focus on losing $50 million and have it become my identity. And those of you listening that have a business, don't ever let it be your identity. It is your vehicle, not your identity. If I'd have let any one of those 29 businesses, many of which failed or seminared, be my identity, I wouldn't have kept going, because then I would have been a failure, right? Your vehicle can fail, but you can never fail. So just remember that if you have your own business, that you never allow it to be your identity. Super, super important.
I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Thanks. It is, going with your identity. And you're right. Many entrepreneurs attribute, even any business person, you're a doctor, you're a lawyer, you're a whatever. I have this company, I have that other company, I work for that. It becomes your identity. But I love that you just said, don't let that be your identity. What would you say your identity is, Rod?
Oh, listen, I'll tell you exactly what it is, because one of the things we do at my boot camps is an identity statement. I help people create an identity statement with phrases and words they aspire to embody. So my identity statement is, I, Rod Khleif, am a magnificent, amazing, passionate gift from God. I'm an incredible father. I'm an inspiring leader. I'm an amazing husband, and I'm a loving billionaire that puts smiles on the faces of children, inspires others to excellence, and rocks the world. Now, I have said that identity thousands of times, and I help my students create an identity like that, because when anything you put the words I am in front of is an identity statement, and people will kill over their identity. I mean, they did, obviously, 9/11, and fight over it. If somebody thinks they're a great father, a great mother, and someone questions that, that brings out the energy, okay? So I am statements are very powerful. I've got a statement right here that on the wall, you can't see it. It says, I am health and energy. And I down in my exercise room here, I've got, all these I am statements that I yell at the top of my lungs when I'm exercising. In fact, when my students come to my live boot camps, that's the question they get most often. Did he really run around the street yelling that stuff? And they're like, oh yeah, we heard it. Now I've got an exercise room so people don't have to suffer through it. But yeah, those affirmations, those I am statements are incredibly powerful. The next piece I will tell you that I think applies to entrepreneurship for sure. It definitely applies to my business, buying commercial real estate like apartment complexes and senior housing, things of that nature, is playing to your strengths. my business is a team sport. I mean, you're not going to take down, like I said, those 300,000 units. My students have raised hundreds of millions of dollars. They don't do that by themselves. They do that in a team, which is why that program is so extraordinary, because, a rising tide lifts all ships, right? But everybody that's successful plays to their strengths, and then they hire, align, or partner for their weaknesses. You see, your strengths are your greatest assets. Don't try to maximize your weaknesses. Success becomes much faster when you maximize your strengths. And because when you're doing your strengths, first of all, you love what you do, and you never work another day in your life. Secondly, and so I will tell you, some of the most successful partnerships I see in my business are an analytical introverted person with an outgoing extroverted person. That's a match made in heaven, because you need to have the analytics, to understand, how to analyze a deal and do a pro forma and things of that nature. But you also need to go build relationships. Obviously I'm the mouthpiece in my partnerships, but so figure out what you're strong at. And, you could do a Myers-Briggs profile or a DISC profile, DISC. That's one Tony Robbins uses. But be sure that you're playing in your strengths. Because like I said, there's so many hats you can wear in my business. You could be the person that finds the deals, or you could be the person that underwrites them if you're analytical. You could be, the investor relations person that builds relationships with people with money. You could be, maybe you've got some construction experience, project management experience, any management experience, candidly. You could be the asset management after you buy the asset. So there's lots of different hats you can wear. You could be the boots on the ground in a particular market for your team. And so, but play to your strengths. Why? Because when you play to your strengths, you're going to be passionate. And passion is required to influence people, because you're loving what you're doing. You're going to be passionate. And influence is required to be successful in any business. If you're raising money, if you're talking to brokers and sellers and investors, you've got to influence them. And when you're operating from passion, it's so much easier because they feel it. I mean, maybe you can feel my passion a little bit. I love this. I love these interviews and doing this, and I love teaching this and talking about it. But, and when you're passionate, that's the fuel, okay? So I would tell you, discover what juices you and inspires you, and do that. That passion breeds creativity, it breeds innovation, and candidly minimizes and even eliminates fear. When you have a speed bump, you just push through because you're passionate about what you're doing. Yeah. You agree with me?
Agree.
Yeah.
And actually, I'm going to share a secret, something that you just said. I have a reminder on my phone that says, at 6 a.m., it's I am healthy. At 7 a.m., I am wealthy. At 9 a.m., I am wise. And like this, every hour, I have an affirmation that has helped me. And I've had it for maybe 4 or 5 years now. And it's really positioned my brain into not focusing on the negative. Or maybe if I see the I am healthy, I wake up and I'm not eating junk food, or I wake up, I'm in the gym, I'm doing my thing because I am healthy, and I'm grateful to be. And then the one after is actually I am grateful, because it makes me realize how I should.
Of course, gratitude. Gratitude is the most important emotion we have available to us, right? It strengthens our immune system. It lowers our blood pressure. It brings us closer to our spirituality. And candidly, it's how you manifest everything you want in life. Most mornings I'll sit in my recliner in one of the other buildings here in my compound, and I'll just do gratitude for the people that I love in my life. And then I'll do and then I'll do gratitude for the things that I want as if I already have them. And I will tell you, and I may lose some of you analytical ones on this, but I've gotten emotional being grateful for things I don't even have yet. Now, I'm going to tell you, if you were like, oh, good Lord, get on with it. This is how I had 50 million to lose and how I got it back. So ignore it at your peril would be what I tell you. It's how you manifest. You could call it prayer, but the bottom line is that when you feel as if you've already achieved something or gotten something that it is that you want, that's the way it works. That's how you get what you want. Now, another key piece in all of this, Ahmad, is who you hang out with, your peer group. And like I mentioned, my Warrior Coaching Program, the reason they're so successful is because they all want more. And I will tell you, you show me your 3 best friends, I'll show you who you are in every aspect of your life, your health, your happiness, your relationships, definitely your finances. And so choose carefully. You see, a lot of people will default to people they went to school with or people they work with. And those people may have their own limiting beliefs and their own fears, and they may hold you back because of those fears and limiting beliefs. And sometimes it's family. So I would tell you, love your family, but proactively choose who you allow to influence you. And, get into a group. If there's something you want to learn, go find a meetup group, or if it's real estate, go to a real estate investor association meeting, but get around people that are doing what you do. You want to be around people that think what you think is hard is easy. That is a key piece to success. People that are going to push you, hold you accountable. Again, when you play tennis, do you play somebody that's better than you or worse than you, right? You know the answer. And so, get into these groups and get around people that want more out of life, and they will, again, a rising tide lifts all ships. They will build you up. And so, sure. And again, don't fear problems or failure. I when I do one of my boot camps, I do a virtual boot camp every couple of months. Do you mind if I mention it for a second? I'll just, a couple of quick things. Okay. Yeah. So, it's 2 days of training, and you can come for $47, and I don't sell anything. So there's no excuse. I mean, if you want to learn real estate, get your butt to one of my boot camps. And if you go to my link tree, it's rodslinks.com. First of all, there's a ton of free resources there, incredible books. Actually, my goal setting workshop is at the bottom. There's a guide you can download. Even if you're not interested in real estate, go do that. Have your spouse do it. Have your kids, if they're over 10 years old, do it. See, here's the thing. People spend more time planning a Christmas party than they do designing their lives. Doing your goals is designing your life. So again, go to rodslinks.com. rodslinks.com, and at the bottom is that goal setting, but also my boot camp site is there. I've had over 18,000 people attend my events, and I haven't had any complaints. The only complaint I ever get in the live events, if I do them live, which I hardly do anymore, is that the room was too cold and the food sucked, something like that. But it's never about the content. Okay. So, if you're interested in real estate, go to Rod's links, and if the price is more than 47, it does go higher. Just DM me and let me know that you heard me on Ahmad's show, and I'll make sure you get that $47 price. But again, I don't sell anything. So if you're interested in real estate, no excuses. Okay. Now, if it's not real estate, again, there is incredible opportunity coming. Besides multifamily, I'm also interested in senior housing. And there's 10,000 people a day turning 65 in this country. I'm one of them. There's a huge need for senior housing, but there's also those 10,000 people a day. There's a lot of people that own businesses in those that want to retire. And so there's an incredible opportunity to buy businesses as well. If there were two of me, one would be absolutely buying businesses right now. But my focus right now is senior housing. I just bought my first assisted living facility a couple of months ago. Very excited about that, what they call the silver tsunami. It's like a tidal wave of people getting old. And so, that thing's really got legs, and there's a huge shortage of beds. But again, figure out what it is you want to do and go learn it as quick as you can, because opportunity is upon us, my friends. And with everything changing with AI, if you're in the tech space, if you're doing anything digitally, you better be thinking about reinventing yourself. In fact, listen to that interview on Joe Rogan with Elon Musk. He talks about this, and he's a pretty smart guy. How a lot of these jobs that are at a computer are pretty much going to be gone in a couple of years. I mean, literally in a couple of years. So if that's you, think about how you're going to reinvent yourself, be it buy a business, be it real estate, whatever it is. But, don't wait till the last minute. I think it's going to create a lot of pain. I mean, it'll create a lot of innovation and some cool stuff, but there's going to be a lot of pain with a lot of unemployment. So, keep that in mind, my friends.
I got the curiosity of this reminded me of there's two paths. I think there's people that are going to listen to this and be like, I'm a W-2 or I'm a young entrepreneur, and I must do something else to build my wealth as well. Like, this is
right.
You're calling and ringing that bell, saying that even if AI is going to take your job, have a nest egg, have something that you're doing on the side.
Well, get started reinventing. Okay, because there's so many other things you can do, and so you just have to think like that. Don't get caught, in fear, waiting for it to happen, because it's going to happen. So, the only constant in life is change. But that's a big one. And so,
Very big one.
just start thinking about another vehicle. And, lots of people, I mean, most of my students do it as a side hustle. They do it with a full-time W-2 job, with kids, with church, with sporting events and all that. And they still, eclipse their income from their W-2 job. So you can do this, be it with me or with whatever you decide to do. But the point is, don't wait, okay? Because it's coming. It's like a train coming down that track right now. One other thing I'd like to well, go ahead, Ahmad.
No, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Okay, well, one other thing I'd like to share, kind of, but it's kind of the last thing I want to say, so I can wait. So why don't we do some questions or whatever first? But I do want to share something important at the end.
Love it. Nice cliffhanger. So there's that person that's there that's going to be replaced by AI, and perhaps a more normal person. But there's a lot of listeners of this podcast. There's a lot of people that I work with, actually, which are entrepreneurs that sold their business. They suddenly went from having a full-time job, full-time business, and then suddenly they sold their business for 10, 20, 50, $100 million. What is your advice for the person?
Well, actually, it's the same advice, because, you're going to be inclined to give your money to somebody to invest. You better learn what it is you're investing in, okay? I see this all the time. You take this hard-earned money and you give it to someone, you don't fully understand what you're investing in. So if you're interested in commercial real estate, get your butt to my boot camp so you have a basic understanding of what to do with your money, okay? Super important. But my biggest advice to someone in that place where they've like exhaled, they're like, okay, my work here is done. No, it's not. You still need to be careful that you don't lose what you work so hard to get. And that's going to require education. So, if you're going to invest in the stock market, if you're going to invest, God forbid, Bitcoin, it's crashing, but, whatever it is, you better learn it. And, every time I get out of my lane and try to do something that I haven't researched, I get my butt handed to me. I did that in the stock market. I never tried Bitcoin, but I listened to Warren Buffett, who said that, he's pretty down on it, but people have made a lot of money, but people just recently lost a lot of money too. So, who knows? But the point is, for those of you, if you've got a big nest egg, don't squander it, for God's sakes. Don't be lazy. Don't listen to a fast-talking stockbroker or even a fast-talking real estate operator, that makes things look good, because you can massage pro formas to make something look good. You need to understand how to do some basic underwriting yourself, and I teach that. So again, come to my boot camp. It's $47 freaking dollars. The biggest thing is 2 days of your time, but there's not a big sales pitch. It's not a sales pitch at all. I don't sell anything. Anyway, that's my advice.
What about mindset-wise? Because now you went from having money, you said your ego was through the roof.
Well, that kind of ties in. That kind of ties into my last piece that I want to talk about. So I'll bring it up, and if you've got questions after that, we can certainly have them. But let me talk about this because it's really relevant, especially for what you just described. So when I moved to Denver, my dad worked for Continental Airlines, my stepdad, so we got to fly practically free. And my brother and I literally flew to Hawaii, camped out on the beach, and it was $38 round trip for the airfare. True story. But I saw a beach, and I'm like, oh my God, this is how I want to live. I want to live on a beach, palm trees, sand, surf, And so for 20 years, I visualized living on the beach. And 20 years later, I built this incredible mansion here in Sarasota. About a $10 million place. I own the beach on one side. I've got my boats on the backside. It's called a Gulf to Bay. It's a slice through an island, which was unthinkable when I was 18. But again, so don't limit yourself on your goals, my friends. But, so I worked for that for 20 years. 2 months after I moved in, 20 years, 2 months. 2 months after I moved in, I'm floating in the pool at night. It's changing colors. It's got fiber optic light. Let me describe the house to you. It's pretty extraordinary. So big spiral staircase up through the middle. It's 3 stories, 10,000 square feet, elevator, wine cellar, big giant waterfall from the second floor balcony into the pool. You had to walk through the waterfall to get to the pool. The pool was in magazines. I'll land the plane with this. On the second floor, I had aquariums built around the staircase that cost me almost $200,000. So this gives you an idea of the house. So I'm floating in the pool 2 months after I moved in, and I'm looking up at this testament to my ego, which is really what it was. It was to prove the world I was good enough. I mean, if that didn't do it, like, forget it, okay? You know, and I had the Maserati and the Mercedes and all the stupid shit I thought was important, boats and jet skis and all that. And my family was inside sleeping, beautiful family, and I got depressed. And I don't mean a little depressed. It was like a holy crap, I am really feeling bad right now. And I mean, and I couldn't understand it. I mean, I just achieved a success like times 10,000. And what happened, Ahmed, is there were three things happening. One is you never achieve a big goal without having other goals lined up behind it. You know, like the good book says, without a vision, the people perish. You know, you need a vision for the future. And I didn't know what I was going to do next. The second thing is it's never about the goals. You got to have them to create that burning desire and that hunger to get out of, you know, to get out of comfort, or, you know, the comfort zone's a nice warm place and we know nothing grows there, right? So, you know, you've got to have some goals and hunger to push through that stuff, to get uncomfortable. But it's never about the goals. You know, they say the happiest days of a boat owner's life are the day they buy the boat and the day they sell the boat, right? Well, but you got to have them. But I didn't. Happiness, though, however, comes from progress and growth. That's what happiness comes from. And so I didn't know how I was going to progress or grow beyond that. I felt like I'd reached this pinnacle. I didn't know what I was going to do next. But the big thing, and here's the message I'm leading up to, is I'd been totally focused on me. You know, Rod, show the world I'm good enough, blah, blah, blah. And that's the year I met Tony Robbins. And I spent 23 years with Tony, and I was on his team for 8 years. And by the way, if you have an opportunity to see him, just do it. Trust me, you'll thank me. But I went to one of his events because I was really down. I bought one of his books. I'm like, man, I got to do something about this. And so I went to one of his events in Fort Lauderdale. This was about 25, 26 years ago. And I saw that he fed families for the holidays. And I was like, what a concept. Do something for someone else. I'm embarrassed to say I had to be, 40 to get that memo. So I called my brother in Denver. I was going to go see him for Thanksgiving, which is coming right up here. And I said, let's feed 5 families. And so he called his church and found 5 families that really needed help. And we bought food and frozen turkeys and roasting pans and toys for the kids if they had them. And the third family changed my life, Ahmed. We go up to this shack, and that's what it was. It was a shack. It wasn't even really a 1-bedroom because you had to walk through the bedroom to get to the kitchen, which had the bathroom off of it. And there was a Hispanic woman there with 5 kids. She came out, sees all the stuff on the porch. She starts crying. Her kids came out too. The older ones start crying. I started crying, and I was hooked. Now, don't leave me on this, guys, because if you want success, you need to stay with me and listen to this, okay? Because it's not ego here. So in the last, 25 years, I fed over 150,000 children here in my area, at-risk children that wouldn't have a holiday meal. I provided tens of thousands of backpacks here filled with school supplies to local at-risk children. I've done thousands and thousands of teddy bears to local police departments for their officers to keep in their vehicles if they encounter a child that's been in a traumatic situation. And the reason I bring this up, Tony Robbins calls it the science of achievement versus the art of fulfillment. Achievement is a science. Like, for example, if you want to learn real estate, get your butt to my boot camp. I'll give you the blueprint. I'll tell you what to do. You just got to go do it. It's a science, okay? But fulfillment is an art. You've got to find what juices you. For me, it's kids. It's also the elderly, which is why I'm getting into senior housing. But maybe for you, it's animals or the environment. Whatever it is, give back right now. And don't say to yourself, well, you had money, that's why you did it. No, you want the money? You give back now because that's how the money comes, okay? That's how God works. Now, you don't do it for that reason, but that's how it works. And so, we've been taught in this country to achieve, to be happy. We shouldn't be happy until we've achieved. And it's crazy because when you give back, I know it's a play on words, but it's an important one. When you give back, you're happily achieving. And I've had people in my studio here that have thousands and thousands and thousands of units. And I can tell they're like I was before I had that epiphany at 40 years old. And I feel sorry for them because they're truly not successful. So anyway, that's typically my final message. But for those of you that have made a lot of money and you're sitting on it, figure out a way to do something with it that makes the world a better place. Make that part of what you do, and your life will have purpose and meaning, and you will be fulfilled and much happier.
I love it. It's so powerful, Rod. I think everybody should take your real estate course just to hear you speak, because I'm sure there's so much more that you give not only the real
Thank you.
estate, but also the mindset, because I think the mindset
Yeah,
is
I spend a lot of time on mindset at my events, which is why my students are so freaking successful. I'm pretty sure our results eclipse pretty much every one of my competitors combined, and I charge a fraction of what they do. But anyway, I do it because I love it. You know, I'm blessed to have a wall in my other building here, my other office, with literally hundreds and hundreds of thank you cards from my students. It's my greatest blessing. You know, I literally get. And this is not ego. Please know this. This is what drives me now. It's not the Lamborghini and the Rolls and the Bentley and all this stupid shit that I've gotten. It's those cards. It's the thank yous. It's the DMs. It's the emails. It's the gifts. It's the cards I get every single day. It's the greatest blessing ever.
how do you think about risk now that you are such a prominent figure and that you're so teaching others to invest and teaching others to follow the recipe? Did the way that you teach risk differ from the way that you do it yourself?
Oh, that's a good question. Actually, that's a great question. You know, there's a lot of distress right now. There's a lot of opportunity right now. I mean, there are great deals out there right now because a lot of operators got in trouble. And we've lost a deal or two in my Warrior program. I think only one or two out of those 300,000 units, thank God. But you know, there's a lot of distress. The interest rates killed a lot of operators. Anybody that bought in 21 and 22 likely overpaid, and myself included. And, you know, operating expense ratios have gone through the roof. I mean, usually when I teach, the average is 50%. Well, it's pretty hard to get 50% on a B or C asset anymore because payroll has gone through the roof. Taxes have gone through the roof. And of course, we won't even talk about insurance. And so, you know, a lot of operators have gotten in trouble, and I've always taught my students to be conservative, which is why, you know, there's not much not much distress that I'm aware of in our Warrior community, thank God. But you know, obviously, you know, hit me once, shame on you. Hit me twice, it's Rod's fault. And 2008 was a big lesson for me about being conservative. And you know, one of the things the biggest thing I teach is to focus on cash flow. You know, in fact, I've got a best-selling book. When you go to Rod's links, there's my #1 bestseller there that by the way, I've never had a critical word on this book. And I've given away tens of thousands of copies. You can actually get the physical copy, pay like $6-7 for the shipping. And it cost me $30 to send it to you. So don't think that I make money on that or I do it for free or anything like that. It costs me to send it to you. Now, obviously that's a lead magnet for me. I'm hoping you like me enough to consider my coaching, but you know, no, I completely lost my train of thought. It's never pretty when you lose your mind. Anyway, yeah. I forgot where I was going with that, but yeah.
The question, it was about risk. So.
Oh, risk. Yes. Thank you. So the reason I brought that up, in fact, I've got it right behind me here. Hang on one second. The reason I brought it up is the subtitle of the book is The New Rules of Real Estate Investing, i.e. the new rules are focused on freaking cash flow. I don't care what somebody paid for it, you know, 3 or 4 years ago. I'll give you an example of this, actually. There's an asset right next to a 200-unit complex we have in San Antonio that is 300 and some units that sold in 22 for $43 million, okay? The bank now owns it. They're down to 28. It still doesn't make sense until they come down to 24 for us. I'd love to buy it because it's right. We'll have 550 some units right next to each other, but it's about cash flow. It's all about cash flow. So, you know, that's my advice regarding risk. Forget value, especially right now. Focus on cash flow. That's the #1 factor when you're evaluating an asset right now.
And continuing this talking shop, and if the principle #1 is focus on cash flow, what is principle 2 and 3 for you?
The management is a huge piece. I'm regretfully having to sue a management company that just really shit the bed on one of our other San Antonio assets. And oh my God, it's just horrible what they did. I don't want to go down that rabbit hole with you, but really pay attention to how you're going to manage your asset. I'm sorry, as it relates to my business, multifamily or commercial real estate investing, the management is super important. Even with the senior housing, you know, we've aligned with an operator that I'm super impressed with. We don't know how it's going to go yet, but we're not going to be the ones that take care of grandma. We're going to be the ones that buy the real estate, and we align with an operator that handles the operations. But even there, that's super important as well. How do they take care of their employees? How do they validate them? How do they motivate them? How do they keep educating them? Because in that business, there's a lot of turnover. And so I was very impressed with the answers I got from this particular operator, who's a nationwide operator. My goal is to buy 10 of these in the next 18 months, these assisted living facilities, because the stats are just staggering, and the returns are much better right now, even than multifamily, significantly better. And so very excited about that new direction I'm headed beside, but I'm still very much multifamily. Again, if that asset comes down to 24 million, I'll snap it up before you can blink. But so let's see, 2 and 3. So management, and your ability to manage that management, your ability to handle the asset management, but just, there's so many pieces to this, honestly. I'd say get your butt to my boot camp, because I talk about the areas you should consider investing in. I talk about how you put your team together. Your team is so important. How to do your careful due diligence, how to finance these things and not get bad financing. I have a really good loan broker that a lot of my warriors use, teach that. How to get into these things for no money down. And in fact, I'm doing a webinar on that tonight, actually, how to buy real estate, no money down. And people think, they think that's, guru hyperbole or BS, and it's not. That's how a lot of this real estate is bought. I've bought literally hundreds of millions of dollars worth of real estate, definitely over 200 million. Actually more than that, probably 300 million, with none of my own money. I don't have a dime in them. Now you're going to say, okay, well, that's Rod. Well, a lot of my students have done the same thing. You raise the money for these things. But so there's so many pieces. I wouldn't want to, give people the wrong idea and just give 2 or 3 of them and think that's enough, because it's not. You need to spend some time with me.
There's many moving wheels.
Yeah.
Rod, what is something that you do perhaps quietly, or perhaps not a lot of people know that you do this, but it's very important to your success?
Well, if you saw my exercise room downstairs, it's like my pride and joy. It's better than most hotel gyms. And I exercise every day. I used to run every day, and I tore my meniscus in my knees. And by the way, if you have bad knees, bad ankles, bad shoulders, like I tore my rotator cuffs as well, wrists, elbows, back, go get stem cells done. Go get PRP, platelet-rich plasma done. Don't get surgery, for God's sakes. I went to Tijuana and got stem cells in my knees. I had PRP in my shoulders and in my back, and it is like miraculous how good it works. Now, it's not cheap, I will give that, but I'm actually flying to Vegas December 10th or 11th. I'm going to interview the owner of the one in Tijuana. It's the one Joe Rogan talks about on his show. It's called CPI Institute. Listen, just trust me on that. Look into that before you go get surgery, please. But I exercise, so I can't run really anymore, and I've got this elliptical bicycle. It's the gayest thing you've ever seen. I lose my masculinity the minute I get on it, and I ride it around the neighborhood to the amusement of my neighbors. But I've got one here, and I've got one at my place in Miami, and that's how I get my cardio. It's a great workout. Health is everything. And if you're going to create a side hustle and you're going to go do this, and you've got a family and you've got kids and you've got a W-2 job and you're going to do this on the side, you've got to have energy. And for that energy, your health's got to be where it needs to be. So pay attention to what you eat. I'm sitting here drinking my greens. I've got a vegetable shake in my fridge waiting for me. And I exercise every single day. So I think that's the most important piece personally.
Thank you, Rod. What haven't I asked you? What's important to you?
Yeah, I would just do this. Don't sit on the sidelines. If you're not absolutely thrilled about, I just want to say this, really not a question, it's just a statement. If you're not thrilled with your life right now, if you don't have the freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want, wherever you want, bring whoever you want, then for God's sakes, change it. Don't be in the same place you are right now 2 or 3 years from now, unless you absolutely freaking love where you are right now. Go make something happen for yourself. Okay. This is a Tony Robbins quote. The quality of your life is in direct proportion to the amount of discomfort you can take. Every time I've ever done anything magnificent, I've gotten uncomfortable. And I'm sure if you're listening, the same would apply to you. So get a little uncomfortable, change your life. You will thank me.
Rod, thank you so much for being here. You're definitely an inspiration. You're definitely, they say don't meet your heroes, but today you didn't disappoint. I think it's really
Oh, thank you. That's so
your
kind.
energy and all your generosity of teaching. And I'm very, very happy to have met you.
Thanks.
And also will continue
Thanks.
to learn from you.
Yeah, if you don't mind, let me mention my podcast because I think, if you're interested in, I don't just talk about multifamily, I talk about every asset class. And I also do a lot of mindset clips. I just did one today on leadership, literally just recorded it before this. So every week I do a clip called Own Your Power. It's a motivational clip. So even if you're not interested in real estate, go to rodspodcast.com, or it's also at Rod's Links. There's my podcast link there, rodslinks.com, which I gave earlier. But Rod's Podcast and all the different ways you can watch or listen, YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever, Spotify. But I hope you'll check it out. I'm very proud of it. It is the largest now in the world, which just blows my mind, candidly. But, when you love what you do, right, I think it shows, and I freaking love this. So thanks for having me on, Ahmed. It's been a real treat, brother.
Thank you. Thank you, Rod. We'll be in touch.
All right.